Heart takes about 80% of the most rich nutrient oxygen from the body. So one could say that since the heart takes all of 80% of the most rich nutrient oxygen, it's very self-serving, it's very self-indexed. But the reality is,
it's no secret many people are caught prioritizing the pursuit of material things over who they are inside. Our guest today, Adam Hergenrother, overcame early struggles with weight and drugs to rebuild his life from the age of 16. He directed his focus towards sports and positive thinking, which now informs his business philosophy. Adam runs a portfolio of companies from construction to real estate and coaching businesses, while publishing books and hosting a popular podcast.
I always try to go into a meeting to make sure we have the right solution for the organization. That could be I'm right, that could be I'm wrong. I'm always willing to be on either side of this. If you go get enough money, power, fame, authority, leverage, whatever it is that you need to get, you have enough to go out there and control the situations around you.
I'm Dr. Jessica Kriegel, and this is Culture Leaders, where we decode the magic behind the masters of movements to unleash the power of culture. This is the story of Adam Hergenrother, master of a movement helping people find fulfillment called the 200% Life.
You're listening to a Culture Partners production.
So, Adam, what is your why?
It's a great question. I think about that in terms of it. I know, Jessica, we were talking before we jumped on about purpose or why. And I think a lot of people were here as Earth is a place where souls come to evolve. And so what does evolve mean? And that becomes the why and the purpose of your life. To me, a purpose or your why has to be something larger than something that can go away. And the only thing that doesn't go away is who you are, ultimately who you are, the consciousness. Your body can go away. You can lose your body. You can lose your ability to use different parts of your body. Your business can go away. Your kids can go away. People, your friends and family can like you and not like you. And so if you attach yourself conditionally to something that's your why, if it's not there, then you suffer. And so for me, I always looking for what is the permanence of how we can bring our why and our purpose into everyday life so it actually rises above the part of the worldly life.
Were you always a spiritual person?
Not to this degree. I think we're always spiritual individuals. It's just covered up. And for me, early in my life, I covered it up with a lot of thick clouds. And I used drugs, food, fuel, all that type of things early in my life as a way of trying to try to be somebody that I wasn't, and trying to be a manipulator so that everyone would like me, because I didn't want to really face inwardly what it was. And eventually at some point when I was about 15, 16 years old, I came to a point in my life where I was 100 pounds overweight, failing classes, in the recreational drugs. And I don't want to call it like an enlightenment moment, because I think that's reserved for masters. It was just a moment of just a reorientation of my life. And I woke up one day and I said, this is not why I'm here. And I can't answer it the same way I can now. That was
at 15 or 16, you had that moment?
I was 16 years old. And I remember coming home, I put Celine Dion on. She was popular back then, so let's be clear. She was really popular.
And I still love her.
Exactly. Thank you. And I put it on repeat. I remember I was in between like laughing and crying, and I just was really unhappy with my life, but not even unhappy with like how I looked or what I was doing. It was just like this deeper awareness, it was just like it dawned on me. Because it wasn't like a voice. It wasn't like somebody wrote a note to me and I read it and I saw it somewhere. It was just like this dawning that was like, this is not the point of your life. And so in that moment, all it did is shift me a little bit. And so I completely removed the friends that I was hanging out with, because they were just lost themselves. They're not really bad people. They were just lost. And I ended up losing 100 pounds in a year. I stopped doing things that I was doing and ended up getting into sports, which is why a lot of my foundation produces for sports, because it gave me so much structure in there. But and I also got into like that during that age. I got into really big into positive thinking, into vision boards, just trying to direct my life into it. And then as that kind of fast forward, I then got very taken over by the ego into business. And I thought this, for me, when people kept telling me, you got to go be successful, Adam, you got to be successful. And what I've come and learned to define that what people really mean is, if you go get enough money, power, fame, authority, leverage, whatever it is that you need to get, you have enough to go out there and control the situations around you so that your inner experience is one that you can control. And that's what people really mean when they go be successful. It's about manipulating the world, people, places, and things, the nouns, right, that are out there, so that you can have this internal experience that's not too bad or great, right? You're just trying to get it the way you want it to by using the world, but it takes so much energy. It's exhausting. It's why people wake up anxious and scared and nervous, because even if they get it that way, even if they get it the way you want it to, you're still waking up going, I got to keep it. How do I maintain this? What if somebody doesn't like me anymore? What if somebody doesn't like my Facebook, or if people even use Facebook anymore? I don't know. Like whatever that is. And so you kind of, that's what I've learned. And for me, that was the beginning 4 or 5 years of my business. I went after that hard. I had this specific income goal in my head that as soon as I make $500,000 in net income, I was going to have this fruit tree in my backyard that somehow was giving me this shock to your energy flow or juice every single moment. And for me, as I got closer and closer to that goal, I started feeling worse and worse inside. And I realized in that moment, I remember actually this, I talk about this in the book, but I remember being at a holiday party, and my mom's the most unassuming person. She could care less about money. And I was like, Mom, I made $500,000 this year. And I was 26 years old. And she goes, oh, that's great. Pass the ketchup. And in that moment, I realized she didn't care, but there was a deeper part of me that said, well, do I even care? What am I even doing this for? And I didn't have the answers, and I didn't like change instantly. I didn't have this miraculous breakthrough. But again, it was another reorientation of my life. And so in that moment, I said, well, this can't be the answer to making this inner experience feel better. I pretty much have everything that I ever had a goal. Remember, goals have a beginning and an end. They're not the purpose of your life. They can't be, because they come and go. So I've gotten those things. So I need to stop making goals about the purpose of my life. And that's the answer, a long-winded way of answering your question. For me, in that moment, about 15, 16 years ago, I decided that the purpose of my life was no longer going to be about goals. It was going to be about to use business as a conduit for personal growth, to use life as a conduit for personal growth, to really, getting what you want is overrated. Sure, you get what you want, but when has that ever made you feel permanently okay? It never does. It trickles down and makes you feel some juice for a couple hours or a couple days, and then you're off to trying to manipulate the world again. And if you just repeat this pattern, once you get out of it a little bit, you look back and you go, man, that's not the way to do it. And the really interesting thing, and then I'll stop, is the minute I got out of my own way, and well, for years, I kind of was like pretending to do that. And I really was like still driven by ego or self-concept a lot. But every moment I was consciously trying to get rid of this as much as I could. And my businesses started doing better. I had more peace. That it wasn't dependent on my business performing a certain way or my wife showing up the way I wanted her to. I just let people be free. And it doesn't mean you don't hold people accountable in business. It doesn't mean you don't have metrics or goals in business. It just means those things no longer consumed me in the way that I was dependent on those to get turned on inside. And so that was the genesis of, well, there's got to be something bigger in your life. And that became my purpose.
It's so interesting. So your story mimics my story quite a bit. I mean, there was always the number I had to make in order to feel okay. Then I started making that number and it wasn't enough. And for me, it wasn't, oh my goodness, I have to maintain it. It was more like, well, the number got bigger. Once I got the number, it just got bigger because I still don't feel okay. And so it must not have been the number. It must be 1 million. It must be 2 million. And every time I got the number, I did feel worse and worse. I was going deeper into drugs and alcohol in my adult life. I did not figure it out at 16 like you. I mean, I don't even understand how a 16-year-old, you're still playing video games in your bedroom. Like, how do you have that kind of a spiritual experience at 16? That blows my mind. I mean, and you actually, can we go back to that? Because you didn't really say. You just talked about after you had this moment, you went home and listened to Celine Dion. But what happened before that that made you think of everything differently?
Yeah, I think it was building up over time. And it was just, I knew I was going down a path that I wasn't supposed to go down. And it just kept building and building and building. And finally, the first 2 weeks that I was a freshman in high school, it came to this head. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? And it just hit me. And the people that I was hanging out with, unfortunately, most of them are actually dead. And they were just really bad. Again, they were lost people. I don't blame them, but they were there. The really funny thing about this is I walked into school one day and I just walked away from them. And they were so
Yeah.
upset that somebody would walk away from them that they
Yeah.
pulled a gun. They pulled a gun on me. We had police there. They broke all the windows in my car. For 2 weeks, it was like, this was back in 1996. So the world was a little bit different back then, but it was
Where?
literally, this was what was happening. And for about 2 weeks, they followed me. Finally, it came down and there was a huge brawl. My brother was in college, so he came down with like 10 of his friends. We were all there, and like it just ended that day. And they never talked to me again. I never talked to them again. But for 2 weeks, I was in. Then I just floated because I didn't have a circle, right? And then I just
Right.
that's when I was into sports, and I started realizing I was pretty good at that. But for me, that moment was just it was building and building and building. And if I look back, I knew at some point I just got to such a low point. I wasn't really depressed per se. I was just like, man, like this is not my life.
So have
And
you ever been depressed? That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you.
I haven't,
No?
never, not to that degree. No, I haven't.
Oh man, my best friend is depressed right now, and I have been depressed in the past. And when you are depressed, you can want to fix it. You can want to feel different. You can be willing to try anything, and yet still these affirmations don't work. People telling you to snap out of it, it doesn't work. It's just brutal. It was the 12 steps that got me out of it. That was the only thing that worked for me to get out of depression. But it is just sucking the life out of you, literally, So it's interesting.
Yeah.
I was
depressed
I was depressed for probably the last year of my using and drinking, and then probably the first 6 months of sobriety too, because when you stop drinking, you're basically taking away the solution to the problem. The problem is your mindset and the way that you think about life. The solution was drinking to make you feel better about it. When you take the drinking solution away and you haven't quite replaced it with a higher power solution, you keep wanting to die. At least that was my experience. Okay, so here's another question I had, though, going back a step. Well, first of all, I don't know where you grew up. What town?
I live in Stowe, Vermont.
Oh, Vermont. Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I also, when I got sober, got rid of every single friend I had. I mean, literally, and I was 37, so it was a different experience. It wasn't, brawling in the high school hallways, and I was a girl too, so it was much more catty snippets via text rather than the fight, the fist fighting. But it was the same thing. When you are in a mindset like that, you surround yourself with people like you, because it also makes you feel better about yourself, because, well, I'm not as bad as Susie or whatever. Yeah, I mean, they're even worse than I am, so I feel pretty good about myself. But sometimes it does take a radical shift in the people that you surround yourself with. And in the program, they have a phrase, which is surround yourself with the winners. And the winners in the program are the people who have a ton of sobriety. So all my friends now, they've got a ton of sobriety because they have what I want. Who do you surround yourself with now that have what you want?
Yeah. For me, when I'll take you back at that moment, it was surrounding myself with coaches in sports, which is why I try to coach so much right now, because it was so impactful of being focused on something else. So that really shaped my life. Sports did early on, especially in high school. Today it's mentors, books, it's Audible, like people that I follow. And really, it's, if you want names specifically, like Michael Singer is a personal friend of mine. I've spent a lot of time with Michael over the years, and he's helped me so much in my life of kind of getting to different places. But it's also, there's a whole bunch of other people, because people say all the same thing in my experience, in all personal growth, spirituality, whatever it is, everyone's saying the same thing. They say it differently and people hear it differently. And for me, Michael really kind of helped resonate with me, specifically in his first book, The Untethered Soul, of just a way. And then the surrender experiment, because I was building a business, right? I had a multi-billion-dollar organization. I still do. And that was like, I was like, well, what else am I supposed to do with my life? Right. And it went into a really deep path that way.
I'm reading that book right now. Funny that you should say that. I mean, I was just this last weekend, I was at a girls' retreat with my best friend and her friend, and I brought that book. I thought it was Living Untethered. Is it The Untethered Soul?
Living Untethered is his most recent book.
Okay, so that's the one I'm reading, Living Untethered. And the first 12 pages changed my life. Yeah. It was like, it wasn't anything new. I mean, I'm in divinity school. I've been a spiritual seeker for many years now. It's not like it was new information, but the way that he presented that information was so simple and so approachable. And he basically said, there's a you in there
Mhm.
And that you has three experiences, something that you're experiencing through your five senses, your thoughts, and your emotions. And
Yeah.
it was like, exactly right. Your thoughts, your emotions, and the things that come through the five senses is all there is. And so when you're having an emotion, which, thank God I don't have depression anymore, but I still get sad or anxious or whatever. And when that happens, I now have the ability to leverage the tool he also talks about on page 151. Look at me quoting pages, impressing myself, which is just the witness consciousness, which is, oh, look, there's me having an emotion. And last year I had my very first panic attack where it didn't feel panicky at all. It
Mhm.
was like a panic attack where my experience was, oh, look, there's a panic. Isn't that interesting? I mean, I wasn't bothered. It was just the physical sensation, but there was no attachment to it. And it was revelatory. Okay, so here's the question. So we're on the same level, right? You're talking about Michael Singer, where I happen to have just read that book. We're having one of those synchronous moments right now. There are a lot of people out there talking about thriving in business who are spiritual seekers that are totally spiritually bypassing.
Mhm.
And so maybe you could talk about what spiritual bypassing is so I can stop hearing my own voice for a second. And then if you could talk about, because I'm always trying to figure out, is this person spiritually bypassing or are they really doing it for real? And do you think that? And how can you tell?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I mean, essentially, spiritual bypassing is like people have some moment of awakening. And then I explain this in like the 4 phases of kind of like spiritual growth. The first phase is kind of like you had this honeymoon phase. It's like you had some meditation, you went to some retreat, something happens, and you're like, holy shit, I'm just a different person. I need to teach everybody about this experience that I'm having. I am a spiritual seeker. I'm going to set a website. I'm going to go get this out there. Who wants to be a coaching client? I mean, they just go out there and they are just, and they come from like they mean well, right? They're just like, I want to share this experience they had. But all it did was the ego is a massive shapeshifter. So it killed one life and created another one. And instantaneously, you've now following your ego into this, look who I am. And let me share all those different things that I'm doing with it. Then for me, at some point though, most people all of a sudden something will happen and they blow up, right? They all of a sudden show, like, they realize in that moment, man, I'm not very far at all. I'm not very far at all. I teach this. I used to teach it. This is our last year doing it. It's called Project U. And we would bring in like 30 business leaders from around the world. They would fly in 4 times a year and we have weekly calls. And people would come in the first quarter that we would do it, we would go through the spirituality, we'd kind of start walking people through there. People would be like, I hit it, Adam. I don't even need to come back to the rest of the course. Like, this is like, I'm already set.
I got this. I got this.
I'm going to go do my own, right? Like, I'm ready to go. And
Yeah.
then inevitably, and you would see them in their body language, they literally throw their arms up. They're like, I've got, like, this is like, I'm here, dude. Like, I don't know what took you so long, right? And you can see it. And then instantly something will happen. They always come back and go, I'm not anywhere. I didn't realize it. I go, hold on. You actually are very far, because you've actually just went through a very important phase of your spiritual growth, which is first recognizing that there's something more. And then number 2, recognizing that you just got caught and you now are recognizing what it feels like to be Velcroed to an emotion or a thought or your ego. So now you have some space in there. I think, remember, one of the most powerful forms or moments in history is that moment before you engage with that disturbed energy. That's where really willpower comes in, because, Jessica, there's a point right before anger takes you over that you get to decide, do I want to willfully allow this anger to take me over? And I admit, once it takes you over, it's not you, right? But you have that moment to be able to walk away. And most people have this, and they don't recognize that moment right away. And so they're just glued to it. And when you're glued to it, there is no space to make the moment, which is why if you're not into this, people listen to this and they go like, what are you guys even talking about? I'm going to go use the world to make it feel like I want, so I feel better. And it's when you start having a little separation, that's when you have this ability to pause. It's always called like relax, release, then act. RRNA. Michael calls it relax or surrender. I always call RRNA, which is you first relax. And one of the things, Jessica, is that you don't ever relax the energy. Because if anger has its nature, anger is anger. You're never going to relax anger. What most people do is like can you imagine like a cleared pond, right? And there's no ripples in the pond. And you throw a rock in the middle of the pond and it starts to create ripples. And you don't like the ripples. So you go, I know how I'm going to fix this ripple. And you jump in and try to smooth it out. Well, how well does that work? That's what people do with emotions. emotion starts to ripple up and they go, I don't like the way this feels. I'm going to jump in there. And you start, why would Jessica say that? How come she didn't ask this question? How dare she not respond to me, right? Or how come that person do that? And all you're doing is jumping in the pond and splashing it up. You're making it worse. So in that moment, if you actually just allow the pond to have the ripple and go to the side and go to the end, it's over. If you allow the emotion to come up and you who's in there witnessing that experience relaxes. You allow the anger or whatever emotion you're experiencing to come up and come through. And by the way, it gets more painful the closer you allow it to come towards you. And as it does, eventually, it's kind of like when your hand is numb. You don't know when it's no longer going to be numb, or when you're about to fall asleep. I ask people, like, how do you know you fell asleep? What time did you fall asleep? You go, I don't really know because I just fell asleep. It's the same thing when an emotion releases. It just all of a sudden releases through you. And then you no longer feel it. You don't in that moment recognize that it's gone. It's only when you look back and go, oh, I don't feel disturbed anymore. I don't feel angry anymore. And that's the whole goal of real spiritual growth. And so the way you can tell somebody if they're spiritual bypassing is, are they willing to do that level of growth? And it's very authentic. You spend a few minutes with an individual, you can see whether or not they're willing to. They're not perfect. They're still going to have the human experience. It's like the Dalai Lama said, somebody asked him, said, you still feel angry? And he goes, I do, but for about 3 seconds. And he said, it's called the sacred pause. The energy is hit, but he's like, it's like writing on water. It's there for a moment, then it's gone. That is a state of consciousness called enlightenment, right? Which is where everything can be everything. There is no dependency for it to be that way. And when you feel that way, there is no desire to turn the world some ways. There's inspiration, but that's different than desire. Desire is when you need something to happen a certain way so you can feel turned on or better inside. Again, going back to that first definition of how most people classify being successful in life is so that I can control the situations so that my inner experience is the one that I'm looking to create, instead of just allowing the world to do its dance and being okay with everything. I was just on a podcast a couple of weeks ago and somebody asked me, I want my individuals to find in a business setting, I want them to go find their passion. And I go, I love that question. I love that you asked that, but why are you asking them to go find their passion? Why wouldn't you rather be passionate about everything you do? Picking up the trash, dealing with a toddler that doesn't want to sleep. Why can't you bring that level in there? Because what you're really saying is, I can be passionate as long as I have the corner office. I can be passionate as long as I have this. And now you've set yourself up for a failure in life because you're just going to suffer. I don't mean suffer like you're going through divorce or your business is bankrupt. You're going to feel not fulfilled. There's going to be an itch that's always going to be there. The only way to get rid of that is to do the deep work. So the outer work is nothing tied to yourself. That's why Michael's original book called The Untethered Soul, which is the definition of that is you're untethering yourself from the outside. Remember,
Right.
Money is money and joy is joy. If you tie yourself to one of those two things, you're going to spend the rest of your life making sure they're tied together.
Okay, so answer the existential question that's been at the heart of my soul for the last 3 years, please, which is the following. I hear everything that you're saying. I also saw my business take off as soon as I stopped caring about being successful, oddly, and it just felt so ironic because at that point I was willing to live in poverty for a moment anyway. It was like I could be okay. I mean, I could be okay in any circumstance at this point. So why is it suddenly taking off? This is exactly the opposite of what I expected to happen. I thought I was going to become a social worker or something. So here's the question. And I want to ask this thoughtfully. I mean, there is also the voice in my head that feels like business is antithetical to the spiritual path. And there's something very takery, so much for thoughtful. You know what I mean? There's something very life-sucking out of business and exploitative at some level in some businesses. And so I talked to spiritual leaders about what they do about it. I had Ryan Leake on the podcast and I asked him this very question. And he said, well, he measures his business success based on giving goals rather than earning goals. So he wants to give 7 figures. And if he can give 7 figures, that means he has to make enough to be able to afford to give 7 figures. And that's how he balances it. It's still kind of, there's this Mother Teresa voice that still exists, right? Like, why are you even in business if that whole system is antithetical to the path? So have you spent time thinking about this and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, many years. I'll answer it 2 ways. The first one is I think a lot of it, our culture has assigned a certain image to businesses and to spiritual leaders, and they've disconnected the two. So in the beginning, I wrestled with this question 17, 18 years ago, very challengingly, because I was like, well, how I like building a business. I enjoy it. And I'll answer that the part of it, but I really want to do more of this inward spiritual growth. And so how do you mirror? I don't want to go hang out in the middle of a cave sitting next to a fire Indian style reciting haikus. It's not even comfortable to sit in Indian style. Like, I don't even want to do that.
I don't want to sweat in a sweat lodge.
Yes,
It's too
exactly.
sweaty.
That's not what I wanted. That's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things, if you ever get a chance to talk to Eckhart Tolle, one of the things he'll tell you is that, like, he's like, I go, well, what is the most common question you get? And he goes, why am I drinking coffee? It's no joke. Because he goes into Starbucks every morning and he loves coffee. And so people see him in there and go, you shouldn't be in there drinking coffee. And he's like, why? And he drinks wine. And he's like, well, you shouldn't be drinking wine. You should be in a white cloth somewhere. Like, again, so I think we as individuals have this self mirage, if you will, of what a business leader should look like and what a spiritual leader. And now we're trying to mirror the two concepts we've created over years in together. And so that's where the friction comes in. And so how you kind of make peace with that, for me, it's giving is great. Those are wonderful goals that you can do this. For me, it's really for business, for me, is an opportunity to allow and bring training of this type of level of growth to all of my employees, to all of the people that work for me. And we have over 1,000 people in my organization. And so every time I get to have a spiritual conversation, personal growth conversation that allows to make their life a little better, that's why I have a business. We're really just a spiritual training company disguised in a business. And so I use business as this opportunity to bring messaging like this to the people that are running it, and to help them, and having fun along the way, right? If you just woke up and didn't really do anything, I think we're supposed to be active. We're at least some of us are. And if that's your nature to be active, then that's great. If you look at the animal life, right, which are likely closer to consciousness than we are, because they don't have the self-concept telling them, which is why if you watch a dog or a cat, like,
especially dogs. No, cats are not spiritually conscious. I'm out on cats, but okay, dogs, yeah.
Yeah. What I mean, though, right? Like that, like the
Totally.
dogs, like you could yell at them and then they'll turn around and come back and they'll give you a hug, right? And they'll love you to death. We keep that baggage inside. So if you watched animal life, you wouldn't see a deer eating a rabbit, right? Like, it's just not there. You wouldn't see like a hawk all of a sudden sitting down there lying in the pond eating lilies. So everything has its nature. And just like every human is a different color, different shape, they talk differently, they have different personality, they're going to show up and they have a different nature with themselves. If people actually get outside of what people think they should be, or trying to design it based on your egoic self, you'll naturally fall in line with what you should be doing. You'll fall in line with what that looks like. And every single thing will support you there. And they'll support you. And all the masters that have gone before will support you. You realize you never do this alone. And it's that there. And again, some people may be in business and then no longer be in business. Some people may find themselves in business. Some people may find themselves having kids. It's not that you set these preconceived conditions on it. And so you approach it differently. And if you're always willing to relax and release and ask the question of just sitting there of going, okay, I'm willing to handle anything. Whatever is there. I'd love to show up and help out. And that may take you to writing a book. That may take you to building a bigger business. That may take you to selling your business and going and doing a bunch of inner work for a couple of years and then bringing it to the world later on. We need to make sure that we're not designing our lives based on what the self-concept or the ego wants, which I know that sounds, it sounds like people use those words all the time, but it really is just, it's the ego is not bravado. Like, look at me, I'm driving a Ferrari. It's literally as simple as, I want my kids to behave a certain way. I want them to dress a certain way. I want my friends to act a certain way towards me. That's egoic. It's anytime that you're using the outside world and now you've decided how the outside world should be is egoic.
Expectations of people, places, or things. Yeah.
I mean, nouns.
Expectations are just resentments in the making. Yeah, I mean, so my sponsor gave me an exercise to write down every time I'm emotionally disturbed and then to identify what it is that was disturbing me. And every time it was an expectation. I went to the car wash 20 minutes before they closed and they wouldn't take my car. And I got emotionally disturbed because I'm like, I'm here 20 minutes. Obviously, you don't close at 5 then. You close at 4:40 because I'm here at 4:40. And I just realized, oh, yeah, that's just an expectation that they would take me 20 minutes. And that's all it was. All you have to do is turn around and drive to the next thing and realize that your expectation was the problem, not the car wash, you know?
Yeah. It's funny,
It's,
a couple thousand years ago, right? The Buddha came out and said, I figured this whole thing out. All life is suffering. He said, number
yeah,
two, all of the cause of all suffering is preference. And that's the
yeah.
expectation. It's
And
preference.
Michael Singer says you got two choices. You can accept and you can resist. Those are
Exactly.
your two choices. That's what you got.
Right.
And it's so much easier to say than it is to do.
Oh,
But
the hardest work you'll ever do.
yeah, I mean, that is the daily work. And it gets harder and harder as you go. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't get easier with practice. It gets harder because the challenges, the path gets narrower, right?
Are you familiar with samskaras?
No.
So a samskara is an ancient Sanskrit term from about 2,000 years ago that they used to describe. I mean, every event, like you and I talking right now, is an event. Your body is energy. Every event is energy. Everything that happens is energy. And I think whether you're a scientist or philosophy or religion, everyone agrees that everything's energy. So a samskara basically is a stored energy pattern within you. And so this is why people have so much disturbance. And I'll just give me 2 minutes and I'll share with this. So what happens is you have an event that doesn't meet your expectation and you don't release it. When you don't release it, the energy is now stored inside you, which is why the circle is the most powerful form in the universe, because it can keep moving but stay centered and stay still. So the minute an event happens, you go, I don't like this. I can't believe this car wash wouldn't close at 5 o'clock like it says. You've now stored that inside you. Now you're resisting now because you resisted the event. You've stored it in there. Now it's blocking you from having your natural energy flow. And then when you see another car wash, you're driving by, it hits you and goes, see, that one's open. How come they can't do it? So again, you keep reliving all these events and think about for all of your, 40 years of your life, how many times you've stored all of this negative energy. And then on the positive side, you store ones that you really like. There's a lot more negative ones, but things you went to dinner with a group of friends and it was amazing. And you tell all your friends about it. And then you come back to that same dinner and it's not the same music, not the same waiter, and you're apologizing because it's not the right thing. So again, you stored that positive energy in there. And so that's why we wake up and go, I want the world to be a certain way. And it's based on this energy that we have that are stored in there. And as you start to relax and release, what you're doing is you're removing these stored energy patterns so you can just truly accept whatever is there. And so understand when you're doing the deep work, that relax and release, what you're really releasing are these stored events that never made it through you, which is why they're so painful, because they were painful at the time. So you stored them with pain. It's like, if I give this example in the book, it's like if you took a skunk and put it in your refrigerator, and every day you came home and you're like, it smells in here, and you take Febreze and you have a cleaner come in every day and you try to mop every day to take the smell away and you light incense and candles. Well, at some point in time, you can do all that work to try to take the smell away. But at some point, you have to open the fridge and take the skunk out. And when you do, it's going to be more powerful, more scent. But the minute you take it out and move it away, it's gone forever. That's why they call the releases the pain that ends all pain, because it truly removes the pain of what is in the first place. We have to be willing to go through it.
Well, that's doing your shadow work, right? And I mean, some of us have more darkness than others. And I mean, I think that has to do with your childhood and how much trauma you did or didn't experience in your childhood. And so for some, the path is longer or harder, let's say, but ultimately we're all on somewhere along on this path. And
Could be lifetimes.
Oh, yeah, multiple lifetimes. I love that metaphor about, who was it? Was it Ram Dass? I think it was Ram Dass, and don't quote me on that because it could be someone else, who said, how many lifetimes, how long does our soul go through the different lifetimes? And it said, well, imagine a mountain range, and every 100 years, a feather goes across the top of the mountain range. The amount of time it would take for that feather to erode the entire mountain is how long you're going back in the circle of life. I mean, that's
Seriously.
a trip, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that image.
That's
Okay.
beautiful. Beautiful
It's
the way
beautiful.
Because think about it, is like then it gives you a reason. Then you go, okay, then I'm here for something bigger than all these other things that I'm doing here. And it gives you
Well,
that
okay.
deeper purpose.
I want to, yes. And in the back of my head this whole time, I've also got this question I'm afraid to ask you, which is, isn't personal growth fairly self-serving? I mean, like, who says that your growth is important? Why isn't it to something other than about you?
The heart takes about 80% of the most rich nutrient oxygen from the body. So one could say that since the heart takes all of 80% of the most rich nutrient oxygen, it's that it's very self-serving. It's very self-indexed. But the reality is it takes all of that, and what it does is it distributes the areas that need it so it all can survive. And I think of the same way of you doing your inner growth is that you become a light for other people to do their inner growth. And if that's the purpose of life, to allow other people to do their growth, which is what the whole point of relationships are, is that you come together and you work on yourself in business and in personal life, at least from my experience. And so the deeper work that you do, you allow other people the space to do their work. And now you're all moving in a direction that opens up themselves to do whatever work they get to do while they're here during this life.
And you know what's interesting? I have a theory that spirituality will be at the core of the future of work, because the spiritual work, the personal growth work used to happen in the town square, in conversations with your community. It used to happen in the churches, and all of those places are disintegrating, right? I mean, the church is dying. The town square no longer exists. We're meeting digitally. Where do people still go, though? Work. We all go to work. And where do we do the most learning and the most, unless you pursue higher education, once you finish high school or college, wherever you go on your track, there isn't a lot of personal growth that comes at you. You have to pursue it unless you're at work. There's entire departments devoted to learning and development, devoted to personal growth in corporations that corporations fund to bring it to their employees. And I think that role is going to get even bigger with time, because it'll be the only place where we can do it, you know?
Yeah. I have a interesting theory, and I actually feel at some point in time, maybe even our lifetime, work becomes a choice. I think the world becomes so productive that and it's not like people want to sit around. They never have for ages, by the way, right? I mean, and for thousands of years, people have been leaving know thyself clues inscribed in pyramids. They didn't talk about like, go get what you want back in the day, right? It's only been the most 40 or 50 years that businesses have come involved. And now I think they're in the next iteration where people will literally, the world becomes so productive in that you can have your basic needs met, that your work will be a choice, but that's where you get to do the most growth. You'll be able to actually bring, because no, it's not going to, I have to do this. Now you can show up and be a different version of you. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to make more money or do different things, just a different version of it, because there's going to be this basic uniform of productivity that's met in our world.
Yeah. It's so fun when you have that. I wrote a letter to my daughter to be read upon my death, you know, because my dad wrote me a letter and I read it when he died, and it was like the best thing ever. And I think I end it with like, P.S. Google know thyself and have fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so
Okay,
good.
so we actually have a caller who has called to ask you a question.
My name's Leah Lemberg. I'm an executive coach with Keller Williams Realty, and I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. Adam, when I think about you and I think about your companies, from what I know and what I understand from the outside looking in, I think about this focus and emphasis on truly being a whole, healthy person in all areas of your life. It doesn't seem like we're just focused on financial well-being. We're also focused on mental, emotional, physical well-being as well. And the little that I do know about you, I know that that probably comes from your own journey interpersonally. So I'm curious if that is as big a deal within your company's culture as it appears on the outside looking in, and how you foster that with your teammates, your workmates, your coworkers.
Thank you so much for asking that question. It's a beautiful question. And again, as kind of we've answered that throughout the time here, business for me is nothing but a conduit for our ability to grow personally or spiritually. And so every time you have employees that have challenges, you work through them together. Every time you have a lawsuit that shows up at your desk, nobody wants that. You get to relax and release through that and release part of that. So business is part of this opportunity. As you said earlier, Jessica, we just get to grow through it, because you wouldn't sign up for things that happen in business that show up, either as a team or as an individual, that you get to go through. Again, that's part of the journey that we are doing this. It's your heart. How you foster that is by being a leader. You have to be willing to, for me, one of the things that we do is every time we go into a meeting, I make sure that I'm not there trying to be right or trying to have the right answer. I always try to go into a meeting to make sure we have the right solution for the organization. That could be I'm right, that could be I'm wrong. I'm always willing to be on either side of this. And if you get all of your leaders to show up into a meeting and start with the minimum of maximums of we could do this, we could do that, you find yourself arriving at a middle point that usually is the best solution for your clients, for your customers, or for the organization in itself.
I would love if you could share 2 or 3 concrete things that you as a leader or your organization's systems and processes do that's different than what you see in a typical organization. If you see your business as a conduit for spiritual growth of your employees, how does that actually look day to
Yeah.
day?
So one of the things we do is everybody that has direct reports, they answer what's called these 5 questions. We have basically the 5 questions that somebody sends every day. First question is what were your successes today, right? Just to get somebody that says, okay, Jessica, what were your successes today? Number 2 is what were your struggles today, right? What did you struggle with? Number 3 is how did you overcome it? And number 4, on a scale of basically 1 to 10, how are you doing right now? Professionally and personally, like wherever you want to share there. How are you doing? And number 5 is who's your replacement, or what is the next procedure or policy we need to put in place that allows you to grow more in your role? And what you find is people answer all 5 of these, they're doing their personal work. It's like a forced journal each day, and they get sent to the leader. The leader responds to that. This is on a daily basis. So that with your direct reports that you're dealing with, they go, okay, I struggled, but I really struggled with my kids this morning. They didn't want to get on the bus. This is just real. I just had this recently, right? They didn't want to get on the bus. I keep trying to tell them to do something and they wouldn't do it. So now I'm late. Now I'm feeling hurried, and we get to work through that. That's an opportunity to work on somebody's, okay, how did you handle this? How could we have done it differently? Then it allows them to make and show up as a better version of themselves from a business standpoint. To me, that's a structural thing that everyone can put in place, but you've got to be willing to allow people to share without any penalty of things. So what I mean by that is when it says who's your replacement at the bottom, they need to be able to put people that are better than them, knowing that they're not just going to get fired tomorrow or whatever it is. And for me, a leader that can hire better people is a better leader. And versus the other way, so many people try to hire people that are not quite as good as them so they can show the leadership how wonderful they did in that. When I look at leaders, I share this constantly. I want you to make a better hire than you, that basically you would be fired if you just hired this person, because that shows me that you actually have the ability to go out and hire and retain and attract talent, which is what leadership is really about. Remember, leadership is not an abstract concept. It's a verb. It's leadership is getting other people to take a new level of action that benefits them in the organization simultaneously, specifically in a business context, right? So the 5 questions are a big one that we do. The other thing that we teach is, for me, every day and we do this remotely, we do this, whatever it is, how people want to structure this, is whenever I get out of my truck every morning, I remind myself that I'm not here to get anything from any of my team members. I'm not here to get anything from our employees. What I'm here to do is I'm here to show up and contribute to whatever the moment is in front of me. My personal why, my personal mission, if you will, is to raise the moment that's in front of me so that the moment is better off for having passed by my consciousness. And so for whatever that means, you could be picking up trash. You could be holding the door open for somebody at a grocery store. You could be serving and helping one of your team members through a challenging personal or business issue. And so we bring that level into the organization, and that cohesiveness allows individuals to not, I don't want to say like be themselves, because when people say that, sometimes people are just being an asshole and they're like, look, you told me to be myself, right?
That's not being myself. What?
Exactly. But they use that as like a badge of what they're doing. And really, they're allowing themselves to understand their strengths and weaknesses so that they can come together and find solutions that benefit everybody. But it's real work. You're just being real. If I'm irritated in a meeting, I go, look, guys, I just want to start this meeting off, let you know that it's been a tough day. I'm going to do my best right now, Jessica. But if I get a little irritated, I want you guys to know why. I mean, that's literally what I would say in some meetings if I was feeling that way. Or whatever. Yeah. Or, you know what? We just had a really good month. We made a bunch of money. So I got to be really careful, because sometimes we're doing that. I may say yes to a financial decision that I normally wouldn't have because I'm on a high, right? Whatever it is, you're just recognizing emotions that are within you, and you allow everybody else to do that structurally within the organization. So you end up having this radical transparency.
Radical transparency. Okay. So what's your philosophy? Here's One of the things that I have suggested and that I believe in and have done myself is when a company has to go through layoffs, there's this period of time where those in the know discuss and debate how many layoffs are we going to do? How are we going to position these layoffs to the world and to the team? Who's going to get laid off and who isn't? And really, most companies know they're going to do layoffs for 3 to 6 months before it actually happens. And a lot of people are left in the dark. Radical transparency in that situation would be telling people, hey, we're going to do layoffs. And now here's the counter argument that will create a lot of fear. Okay, sure. When I was the CHRO of a tech startup that had to do layoffs. I told everyone on my team that we were going to do layoffs about 3 months before we had even decided who would go. And I said to them, I don't know which one of you may get laid off. I think some of you may get laid off, but I don't know for sure. And I'm just letting you know, because I wasn't attached to them staying and what that would mean for the team and the business and the headache it would create for me. I wanted to do the right thing. Now, one of the people on the team ended up finding another job and leaving. At the end of the day, we would have laid her off actually, so it ended up working out. But the other guy who stayed had a very anxious 3 months. And so I'm not actually sure that was the right decision. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. What is your thought on that in radical transparency and the balance of protecting people and also giving them free will to make a decision so that they can protect their financial livelihood and their families?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. And one of the most challenging ones to answer. I think and I'll answer it in a couple of ways. One, it's situational too. I think there's sometimes, depending on being an HR, is there any legal ramifications of kind of leaking information, different things that are out there? Are you a publicly traded company that has certain guidelines you have to do this? There's different things that go on there. I'll tell you the way we've handled it personally. When the minute we realize that we're going to have to do some level of layoffs in the organization, we will go to those individuals and we say, look, here's the situation. We are going to be removing you or removing this position. Most of the time it's a position if that's the case. And you have the opportunity to stay on until you find another job or this happens. Or if we're removing the person, like for instance, I'm thinking of one personally that we just did recently. We went to them and sat down and said, look, you can stay in the role as long as you want, as long as you're showing up. And the minute you find the job, you can leave, or the minute we find another person, just understand that we will give you a 30-day notice for what that looks like. And every time we've handled it that way, people have stayed on for about a month and a half, and they've either found a job or we found somebody else to do it. But we've never had any blowback. We've never had anybody sue us from those type of things. So we're really just kind of being open from that. But you do run the risk of saying that and somebody walks out that moment. And that you just have to understand those different things. But if you're doing I've never had to do like 150 layoffs or anything like that. So we've never had to do mass layoffs like that. And there are some legalities around those things. You could just take Elon Musk's approach, which is just like, if we don't get the organization together, everyone's fired, right? Like the company's, he's probably the most radical individual when it comes to that type of stuff. But yeah.
Do you see the article? There was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday or the day before. He's doing a bunch of drugs apparently, and everyone's really concerned about it. So, yeah, I was like, yeah, that tracks. Actually, I am not surprised.
LSD, ecstasy, cocaine,
Yeah, he makes people sign NDAs when he throws parties so that they won't tell anyone that he's doing a bunch of drugs. I mean, someone must have leaked it. It's like, yeah.
Have you read his biography?
No, my CEO has though, and he loved it. He thought he learned a lot. I mean, he's not necessarily a big Elon fan, but it feels like something I should read. Have you?
Yeah, I did. I felt the same way. It actually gave you a better understanding of why he does what he does. I mean, he's a deep person. One of the things that I love at the very end, Elon's giving I think it's a commencement speech. And somebody asks him, how do I be Elon Musk? And he sat there for 3 minutes. You know how he does, didn't say anything. And they talk about this in the transcript. And he said, I don't think anybody should be Elon Musk. The immense amount of pain that I cause in myself every moment is next level, and nobody should endure this pain. And it was so real, it was just he talks about in the whole book about just how miserable he is in his life and how nothing. So again, he's a wildcat.
Yeah, totally. Trauma survivor. I
Sure.
mean, there's no other
His
explanation
childhood
for
is
that kind
wild
of behavior.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have so much compassion for everyone who, just you think now having a child, and I know you have children as well. You just see these little people with these little eyeballs, and you're like, wow, the amount of stuff that people go through. I was just listening to a speaker tape this morning of a woman whose father would not let them play, giggle, or talk in his presence, and she grew
Wow.
up unsurprisingly to do a lot of self-harm. I mean,
Huh.
what is the experience? It just breaks my heart. Okay, well, not to end on a complete bummer, but I have my last and favorite question that I just love this question, which is, what is something that you don't get asked in these types of interviews that you wish you were asked more often?
Why are people afraid of death?
Okay, and so why are people afraid of death, Adam?
I know where I was like, right when you said we don't want to end this last moment, I was like, oh, but I think about death probably 30 or 40 times a day and not in a morbid way.
Yeah.
Most people are still trying to get some special experience from life, and they think death takes away their opportunity to have some special experience. But life itself is the experience. Death just makes life precious in many different ways. So the minute you stop realizing that the experience you're having is life, and it's not some mental rehearsal of some image or some goal that you're going to have. And once you have that, then life will kick in, and then I'll have that experience. You start to utilize the opportunity of knowing that you're going to die at some point in time in your future, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100 years. But you start utilizing this as an opportunity to not waste the moment. And the moment itself is when you feel any emotion, you feel the experience that you're having. That is the experience. And when you do that and you're truly aligned with the moment that way, of that experience, death takes nothing from you because there is nothing else that it can take from you. People only fear death because they're afraid that it's going to take, they haven't hit their moment yet. Well, people stop needing to wait for those things and lean in to the moment that they're experiencing. And the more that you can do that, the more that life will unfold in the way that is supposed to be for you. And you have just way more joy and lightness and peace in your life. And that's really what people are looking for, is absolute freedom, which is the ability to walk through this world undisturbed. They can walk through it. Things can happen. Mechanically, they'll have to deal with them. Doesn't mean you don't act with them, but they don't bother you. You don't have suffering over the small things in life, and you get to enjoy just about every single thing that happens, or at a minimum, you can always appreciate what is happening in your life.
That's beautiful. There's a song that my boyfriend just gave me on a playlist. He makes me playlists like every month. And it's something about, it's called If We Were Vampires. And there's a line in the song that says, if we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke and laugh at all the lovers and their plans. I wouldn't feel the need to hold your hand, because it is
Yeah.
only because we know we're going to lose each other that we really embrace and want to hold on to each other. And if death was a joke, I mean, wouldn't we just be fairly apathetic about everything because we wouldn't be afraid to lose anything? And that is the joy and the mystery of life at some level.
Yeah. I mean, we've hit Disneyland. You come down here and there's people that are all different. There's animals. I read this thing they found a turtleback rock on Mars, and it's a rock that looks like a turtle, and they're all excited about it. I'm like, it's every single sort of animal that's around you. There's birds that sing to you. There's deer that I'm just like, what? Like, just like we forget that, like, just stop for a second and look around.
Yeah.
And that's appreciate the moment that you're in. Whatever you're getting to experience is a beautiful gift.
Yeah, that is the gift of gratitude, and it's not just making a list of things you're grateful for, or even just being aware of things that you can be grateful for. It's conjuring the feeling. It's actually generating gratitude as an action verb, as a feeling in your body that really starts to change your life. Our CEO in our company, Culture Partners, every single meeting we have, we start with sharing gratitude, because you can't be in a negative headspace when you're in gratitude. So we might as well start in a good headspace and then take the meeting from there, which I love doing that. It also makes me feel seen as a person beyond the person who works at this company trying to accomplish a revenue goal.
Awesome. That's wonderful.
Adam, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much for opening up yourself and sharing your words of wisdom and sharing your story. I have absolutely adored this conversation, and it has been such a pleasure to get to know you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing as well, too.
Thank you. Now, if people want to hear more or learn more about the work that you're doing, where can they go?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can go to adamhergenrother.com, or you can go to the 200% Life on Amazon, or the 200% Life podcast. That's where you'll find a lot of the stuff that we're doing.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Culture Leaders. I'm Dr. Jessica Kriegel, hoping you found inspiration in today's story. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts. And thanks for listening.
To connect and learn more about today's guest, visit the links section on this episode's show notes. Please be sure to connect with Jessica and the show at jessicakriegel.com. There, you'll be able to see all the episodes and learn more about transforming culture at your organization. This episode is a Culture Partners production. Until next time, keep shaping a positive culture. Thanks for listening.